No, I mean.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and welcome. We have about, what you can't see behind the scenes is approximately 35 people logged on to Zoom. So everyone at Zoom from home, welcome to the meeting. We're going to commence. Thank you for your patience. What they do see is what you see here on the screen. So really excited to welcome you all here and appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives to participate in a really exciting community building project. I'm going to turn it over to Honorable Mayor Frank Scarpitti to give some welcoming remarks.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this community information meeting. And thank you for taking time out of your schedules to learn about this important initiative. And before I just want to give some context to the work that's being done. Wanted to recognize the members of council who are here. We have Regional Councillor Jim Jones, who's here. Welcome, Jim. Thank you very much for being here. He's also chair of our Development Services Committee. We have the local councillor for the area, Ward 3 Councillor Reed McAlpine, who's here at the back, and local councillor just next door in Ward 4, Councillor Karen Ray, who's here. And I think that's it for members of council, but we had a very late public meeting last night past midnight. And I know between that and certainly other commitments that members of council have, there's other meetings and other events that I've also asked members of council to attend on my behalf. And we begin this particular meeting, first of all, by acknowledging the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and their commitment to the stewardship of the land. We acknowledge the communities in Circle, the north, west, south, and eastern directions, and Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, Seneca, Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share the responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure that the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. And we here at the City of Markham are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. And with that, I again want to say thank you for your interest. This is part of a process that hopes to develop a long-term vision for this area. This is an area that I'm very familiar with. I grew up just south of here at McCowan and Highway 7. And certainly from the early days of when my family moved up here in 1965, fair to say there's already been quite a bit of transition from what this corner and this corridor looked like back then. And as communities evolve and continue to grow, it's fair to say that we want to make sure that we plan and that we align that growth with some of the investments that have been made and are going to be made. And I think you're all very familiar with the landmarks within the area, certainly Markville Mall, certainly the GO Station, the Centennial Community Center, even Markville Secondary School, and the very established employment area that's on the east side of McCowan Road, south of Bullock. It's a very stable employment area with a number of small and medium-sized businesses that not only serve this area, but I know serve customers beyond Markham's borders. But as the community continues to grow, and I have to say, I think since we first started this process, there's been a lot of policy changes, even at the province of Ontario, a heightened awareness and focus by the provincial government to try and provide more housing options and certainly more housing in general, and to align where that housing goes, not only with investments that have been made, but as I said, investments that will happen in the future. And the bus rapid transit system that is very evident west of here, the dedicated bus rapid transit system that really provides a level of service almost like an LRT at a third of the cost, is going to eventually be extended right along Highway 7 all the way out to the Cornell Community Center, where the Cornell bus terminal just opened up last fall. So as we are looking at this area, it's an opportunity to be proactive, to think about how we want the community to evolve. And to be honest with you, there's many projects that are beginning to emerge in many communities across the GTA. And I think rather than always just responding to projects that come in, it's our ability to kind of say, how do we want the community to be shaped, recognizing that it may change, but how do we design it, plan for it, and make sure that the communities get built are complete communities. And in some respects, this exercise that we're doing here is also being done in other parts of Markham, certainly over at the north end of Highway 48 at Major Mackenzie and south of there, again, because of the proximity of the GO station. Old Kennedy Road in Milliken Mills, again, an area that's in transition, and with the investments that have been made already in the GO and the overpass. If you've been along Steeles Avenue, you know that separation has now happened and completed. And in Markham Center, which is around the Warden and Highway 7 area, where the Markham Pan Am Center and York University is coming and will be open by fall of next year, is also an area that we're reviewing as opportunities again to grow, because the whole of the GTA is growing, but again, to ensure that we're planning for complete communities. So I thank everyone for being here. And if I could also say, I'm impressed with the number of young people that are here tonight. I don't know if you're at one of the planning schools and that's why you're here, but whatever brings you here tonight, for me, it's important that we also hear from young people and they be engaged in the process. One, to really understand how community building happens and what's needed and what's important and what are priorities, and also to hear what their vision of the future of Markham will be as well. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over and introduce Arvind Prasad, who's our Commissioner of Development Services, who will tell you a little bit more about the format tonight and the process that we've undertaken. So thanks for being here. Thanks for your feedback, by the way, that we received back in January and February. I know both our staff, our consultants, and members of council will look forward to the ongoing discussions and input that we have from the community. And with that, please welcome Arvind Prasad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to also acknowledge the regional and local councillors that are here today, but also, of course, wish a very good evening and welcome to everyone here today for the Markville Secondary Plan Visioning Workshop. Now we have, I don't know, there's probably about a good 50, 60 people here, and virtually, I'm not sure where the camera is, but we have a number of people also on the Zoom call. So that's amazing. It's amazing because I've been in this business as a planner for about 34 years. And, you know, we do a lot of work writing reports at council and a lot of work around the office. But there's nothing that pleases a planner more than coming out to an evening meeting, seeing people engaged, showing up, taking time from your personal lives to come here today to learn about a project. It's rewarding for us. It's rewarding for us to engage you to hear your feedback, to understand your perspective, and to really think about what that perspective means for a project we may be working on. Because the land use decisions that are made in our world, in our planning world, those decisions that are made by our council is the legacy that we leave behind. We're long gone. Our children, our grandchildren are left with the communities that we design and plan for today. So these are important, very important times for input. So for that, I say thank you. This is the third event held in the past few months on the Markville Secondary Plan Study. On June the 19th of this year, a community information meeting was held that introduced the study, and a significant amount of feedback was received from the participants to help inform the study. And then on February the 3rd of this year, a visioning workshop provided an opportunity for participants to provide input on the draft vision and guiding principles for this Markville area. For those who were unable to join this meeting, there's a recording of the presentation and meeting available online at markham.ca/Markville. And in fact, if you go there, markham.ca/Markville, you'll see the resource materials and everything else we have for this project. And of course, a recording of today's presentation will also be made available at that website shortly after this event. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to engage and hear from you all to help provide an input on the draft land use and built form options. This is really your opportunity to tell us what aspects you like and don't like about the land use and built form options that are before you today. Your input will help us as we continue to plan for a complete, vibrant, and healthy community in Markville. Feedback obtained from the second community information meeting and all consultation events will be used to inform the development of a preferred land use option and built form option to guide future development in this area. Once we hear from you today and all the other consultation we're doing online and everything else, we're going to take it all back, think about it, and provide some recommendations in terms of what the future of this community can look like. So I want to acknowledge today some of my staff here. Now, of course, I have too many staff here to name them all, but so I'm going to name a couple of them, and the rest, you know, you're very valuable. We're going to run out of time. So Director of Planning and Urban Design, Julius Escato is here, and our Deputy Director of Planning and Urban Design, Daryl Lyons. Daryl and Julio, thank you very much for you and your staff to put this on today. I'm now going to pass it on to Christine Furtado from WSP, and Christine is going to facilitate the next portion of this meeting. So Christine, please come on over and do that. And thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And really looking forward to discussing today. So let's just do a quick check. Everybody online, any change in numbers, any change in access? The beauties of hybrid meetings. We want to make sure everybody can view and hear us. Good stuff. Thank you, Philip. Great. So today, a little bit delayed, but we're going to go through an agenda and meeting objectives, and I'm going to discuss a little bit about how to participate in today's meeting. We're going to do a quick brief introduction, and I'd like to welcome Andrea, our Deputy PM, to present later on, Brent Raymond from DTA as well to present later on, and many, many thanks to the city staff that are here today, including Liliana and Duran. So thank you very much. The purpose of today is really important. It's to understand what elements of the land use planning that we're going to present to you today are important to you, and what elements can we improve upon or maybe modify. Elements like parks, elements like employment areas, elements like roads, road networks, and streets and connectivity for cyclists, pedestrians, cars, etc. So really excited to present these options to you today and to understand what elements are important to you and what elements we can either modify or enhance. In addition to the presentation, you're also going to see a number of panels around the room. There's going to be an opportunity, if we don't get to your questions during the Q&A today, there's going to be an opportunity to have further in-person discussions with members of staff and consulting team. So there are 3 ways to participate. For those of you online and in Zoom, thank you and welcome. You can please use the Zoom chat at any time to provide us with your comments. My colleague Philip is going to be collecting all of the comments from members on Zoom, and we're going to be going through those later on during the Q&A. There's also comment cards, which I want to thank our staff WSP at the introductory tables, where you can pick up a comment card and write down any information that you might have for the team today. You can leave that with us when you leave, and you can also submit that to me directly if you'd like. And then certainly, but not least, there is a full website where all of this information will be available, and you can connect with the project team in person following this presentation. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Andrea Salese to present a little bit about the project.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Christine, for the introductions. Again, I'm Andrea, I'm the Deputy Project Manager, helping the city with this, this study. And we are a small group that's here today from the consultant team, but we're part of a broader team of subject matter experts. So as an example, my background is in planning and policy, but we have subject matter experts here today and also behind the scenes working on matters related to transportation, looking at parks, community services and facilities. And we also have our engagement team that consists of Christine, who you've already met. We have a few members outside. But as Mayor Scarpitti said today, it's really great to see members of the younger community out today. So we also have Urban Minds, who's leading the youth engagement program. So I won't go into everybody that forms part of this project team, but you can see them there on the slide. And really, we're here to provide a kind of comprehensive look at this study. And as we'll see in the next slide, also provide an analysis of certain components of the study that will help inform the policy framework. So for those of you that haven't joined us before, maybe weren't able to come out to our first community information meeting in January, or you weren't able to participate in the visioning workshop, you might not know where we are in the process. We're a little far along. We're about halfway through. So we're currently in phase 3. And as the title you can see on the screen there is telling, we've established what we think is a really good vision and guiding principles that provides the basis for the draft land use and built form options that you see around the room today, which my colleague from DTA, Brent, will be talking to in this presentation. But there was work that we needed to do to look at existing conditions. So there was a reconnaissance that happened after phase 1 in phase 2. So after we had initial outreach with key stakeholders, we took a look at what is there in the ground today, what is in the study area, and looked at opportunities. We looked at constraints. We also, launched the project through the webpage. So we are towards the end of phase 3 in the process. After this meeting today, you heard the commissioner talk about how we're going to take all the inputs, which includes your feedback. Inputs also include technical analysis. So we're going to refine the draft land use options. We're going to hopefully come up with a preferred option, which will feed into phase 4. So phase 4, this is a 5-phase process. Phase 4 is the technical analysis. We take a look at transportation. What is the impact of the preferred option, as an example, on the existing transportation network? We take a look at the existing municipal infrastructure that's in the ground and what improvements need to be made to be able to get running water, to flush toilets. We're also going to summarize the input that we heard from today's meeting. We have some outreach that we're doing with the youth community in June, and that's all going to feed into an interim report and engagement summary, and we're going to present that to the Development Services Committee. So once we have a preferred option, we've done our analysis, we can then finalize, based on that input, a preferred option. We will put forward recommendations as a consultant team, but it's an iterative process. So it's not as linear as you can see on the screen here. It's not just one way. There's a lot of dialogue, as the team at the city can attest to, between our team, between members of council, and of course the city, to land on a preferred option. Ultimately, when we have those recommendations, it's not a policy document yet. The city will then take our recommendations, they'll refine it, they'll put together a policy framework to help guide land use and built form, the location of parks and open spaces, community services and facilities. We're going to have urban design guidelines, which our team at DTA are going to help us create. We're going to have a strategy to make sure that hard and soft services keep pace with development. We're going to look at transportation, ways to get people out of their cars, ideally, if we're intensifying the area. And finally, we're going to present the preferred option to the Development Services Committee in towards the latter end of phase 5. So we've talked a lot about a secondary plan, and I don't know how many of you have been to one of these meetings. If you're on the younger side and maybe you're undertaking a civics class like my kids are, and you've never heard the term before, maybe you've heard of a local area plan, maybe you've heard of an official plan, but a secondary plan it's a policy document. So it's not a master plan, but it provides guidance within a certain geographic area. So it's contextual, it's local, it's not as broad as an official plan, but it's not as detailed as a zoning bylaw, as an example. And really the goal of a secondary plan, especially in this case, is to provide a policy framework that supports the creation of complete communities. Complete communities are places where you can get everything you need within a certain distance. Not all secondary plans include employment areas. We're going to hear today about different variations of what an employment area within Markville could look like. This particular one does, and has a very robust employment area, I would say. And it also provides guidance, as I mentioned before in the previous slide, about providing public infrastructure and protecting the environment. What does it also do? So I mentioned an official plan. An official plan is a blueprint for how a city should grow. And really a secondary plan takes that policy guidance and official plan. It implements it, it makes it more specific, and it fits the local context, as I mentioned before. And really all that good stuff ends up in an official plan amendment. It goes before council, and you have the opportunity to comment on that as well. Most importantly, I think what I'll say in conclusion on this slide is really a secondary plan reflects the vision and aspirations of a community. You're here today because you care. We're here to talk to you about what you care about, and we're really looking forward to hearing your feedback on the options that we're about to present to you. So with that, I believe I will be passing it back to you, Christine.
Thank you, Andrea. And for most of you, you might have seen some of these slides before, but just a quick recap for those who might be new. As Arvind Prasad indicated, we've done a lot of engagement to date with youth community, with community information meeting number 1. Over 120 people attended that back in January. In February, we did our visioning session and created visioning boards, similar to what youth did, sketching out what their ideal land use concept would look like for this area. And, I was driving here. I'm actually not from Markham, and drove here a bit early, and I was really excited to see a lot of youth on their bikes coming out of this neighborhood area. And it was really, really lovely to see. And it made me think about some of the elements that we're planning for here for the future. And sometimes thinking into the future is difficult. But when I reflect on what we've heard from youth and from the community members, it's quite evident that there's a strong future thinking here, which I really appreciate. So quick recap, some of the things we've heard from the youth in terms of what they really would envision here, and those elements that we're speaking to as part of the land use planning options are the ability to have recreational facilities and entertainment facilities, more trails and connectivity, traffic calming and safety being very, very important to the community as well. And then some more diversity in food options, not just necessarily what is existing here today, but some options in addition to what we know, what is a given, which is the mall, of course, is a given. We've also heard a lot from the community where we did individual live pollings with the community. We've also heard from the community about recreation and transportation being important. The obvious that there is a opportunity here for shopping and the importance of Markville Mall is without a doubt an obvious thing that we keep in mind as planning for this for the future. And again, safety in the natural environment and weaving that into the area for the future is also very, very important. The visioning workshop was quite unique. We were actually able to go online into breakout groups and hear from individuals in a more smaller setting. And we were able to collaborate on a visioning board together. And we collated all of the feedback on all of the sticky notes from those various boards to understand what those key themes are so that the planning group and the city staff can make sure that that information is reflected in some of the land use options you'll see here today. And we're also here today to make sure that what you see reflected is right. Did we get it right? Is there more? For you to let us know, or if you have questions of clarification for you to let us know. In addition to all of that, we've also launched various tools online, Your Voice Markham, where individuals can provide inputs. And this is still available to you at any point throughout the project so that you can check in. And if you are interested in following along as the project progresses, you can definitely register. And there's even an option if you'd like to join a focus group in the future, you can put your information and connect with us. So given everything we've heard, the vision for the area, and I'm not going to read it, it's out there on the screen, but really important elements of the vision from what we heard and collating all of that information is really the importance of Markville as a destination where culture and entertainment community can come together, where there's a mix of uses, where there's frequent transit mixed with active transportation options, where there's public spaces, as well as preservation and reflecting that importance of employment lands as an economic hub, the mall especially being an important aspect of this place. And again, the enhancement of the green spaces and a focus on sustainability for the future. So in order to move forward, we often have to reflect on what grounds us and what are our values. That sometimes can be communicated out as principles. And so the team has drafted and reflected on this, and the 8 principles that we keep reflecting on and grounding us as we move forward with this planning project and study are as follows. The first one is the idea of a complete community. That means having all a range of options for you within close proximity and having housing integrated with employment uses. Integrate Markville Mall throughout this area, having mixed use residential, but also employment lands. Creating pedestrian and cycling friendly streetscapes through the secondary plan area. Connect and enhance parks, green spaces, and public realm elements to existing parks and open spaces for future and current residents and visitors. And to ensure interconnectedness and complete streets that can accommodate active transportation. The 6th guiding principle the team is reflecting and moving forward with is to support the establishment of Markville as a node and key development area, not only in Markham, but as a regional geographic area. To leverage present and future higher order transit facilities. And as Mayor Frank Scarpitti and Arvind Prasad indicated, there's quite a lot of future transit and transportation options that are coming. And to create fiscally viable development and affordable housing opportunities. Sometimes it's hard to think 7 generations ahead, but our children's children, where are they going to live? How are they going to move around this space? That's the long-term planning thinking that we like to work with you today to discover. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent to deliver a presentation on the draft, land use, and built form options.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brent Raymond. I'm a landscape architect and planner, urban designer with DTAH, and we're part of the consulting team. There's an approach that we take to developing options at this point in a project. And there are really three things that we look at first. First, it's the public realm. What exactly is that? Those are the streets and the spaces in between buildings, the parks and open spaces, the natural areas. That creates the framework upon which everything else falls into place. So given all of the principles and the values that people had expressed to us, this is where we're starting. We want to create a walkable place, a place that you have walking and biking as the first choice, as moving around the new built out developing Markville. This is fundamental, and you'll see variations through each of the options, but this is our primary starting point. Then we layer in land use and built form. The land uses are primarily residential mixed use, commercial uses, and the employment lands. So what you'll see in the options are different arrangements of those uses in the different options. And then we talk about the overall intensity of buildings, of people. And there are three variations in that we'll go through. One is the official plan, what the official plan currently says for the area. We need to understand what the provincial and the regional population and job growth targets are for the major transit station area work that's been done around the GO station. And this is work that also informs our effort here. We'll look at the range of redevelopment. Not all of the lands will redevelop in the same way. And then we'll look at the relationship between density and then all of the other inputs. Andre had mentioned the list of other supporting studies that are ongoing around community services and facilities, schools, transportation, servicing infrastructure. All of those are informed by the outputs from these different density and intensity studies. Oh, so again, the elements of the public realm are shown on this slide. We have the streets and blocks. This is an absolutely critical part of establishing a complete walkable place. Parks and open spaces. We need new places within Markville. Right now, within the study area, there are no parks. So that is something that is going to have to come along with intensification. We'll also need more urban places, smaller plazas and squares where you can have different types of activities. It's not all about active recreation and dog walking and things like that. It's just about gathering, having markets, art fairs, the social activities that really create that stickiness in a community where people can come together and develop relationships. So those three parts are when we show green on the plan, on the various options, this is what we're talking about. Built form, we are looking at three primary types of buildings. They're low-rise buildings, which are up to 4 stories. Then we have mid-rise buildings and then taller buildings. All of these are part of what we anticipate happening within Markville. And then land use. Again, they're residential uses where there are no commercial within those buildings, but sometimes residential can happen in all of those various building types with retail at grade. Then we have the primary retail commercial areas like the mall, like a lot of the other retail commercial that currently exists, community facilities and institutional uses, as well as the employment uses. The mayor had mentioned the importance of the existing employment area. So all of these are part of what will make the future Markville. So again, going back and talking about this first step of thinking about the future streets and blocks within the area, the image on the left is what you currently see within Markville. It's not a street network that supports walking. It's just not comfortable. The scale of it is to that of an automobile. Very few people, I'm sure, would choose to walk between Bullock and Highway 7 for anything, unless forced to. But what we see happening in the midterm as development happens is starting to introduce new streets, new intersections. And all of this is to create front doors for new development, but also to create a walkable scale so that you have many different choices for how you move about within this neighborhood. And then in the full build out, we anticipate the extension of the street network to create something that's truly urban. Now, the three options that we're looking at, and we've just given them names, but they have components within them or parts that you may like, and they may have parts that you dislike. But what we're hoping to find out and get your opinion on is how can all of the various things that you like come together into the preferred option that Arvin had noted is really what we're aiming to do here. So the first one, we talk about smaller parks distributed throughout Markville and using the official plan land use designations and the density or the height of buildings within that. The second option is to look at how can we start to introduce some mid-sized parks along with the smaller parks and have greater intensity. So that would mean more buildings, more people located around what we call the nodes. Those are the primary intersections of major streets. So Highway 7 and McCowan, Bullock and McCowan, those are what we refer to as the nodes. And then the third option, we're looking at a wider range of parks, small, medium, and large. And then looking at redevelopment happening not only in the nodes, but along the corridors. And those corridors are Highway 7 and McCowan. So greater height at the nodes, lower height in the middle, but still more height than what we would find in the other two options. So this is a napkin sketch idea of how you might start to visualize if you were standing at the edge of Markville and looking across it, how you might start to think about the height distribution. So option one, the official plan, everything's pretty much the same. You have your lower rise residential housing and then your mid-rise development. Option two in the nodes, you would start to create these peaks of height that happen around these important intersections. And then in option three, looking at it, again, taller height around the nodes, but greater height happening in between. So option one, looking at the official plan in smaller parks. Now, this is for the most part just the street and block network, but we have defined where the large employment zone is maintained in its entirety. So what you start to see here is that the lands are starting to introduce these smaller streets, these smaller blocks, and that between the areas where we would have new buildings, there are parks. So what's important to understand in this plan is that the new heights are limited to mid-rise. So it's not, there are no towers as part of this particular plan. What you see in the blue and the red dots that are located at these important intersections are where are being planned and anticipated future bus rapid transit stops. So that gives you an indication of where both a higher order transit or BRT transit on McCowan would have stations, as well as what would happen along Highway 7. And then, of course, there's the GO station. Now, what we do is we introduce through three more diagrams, the different components of this particular option. First, we'll go to parks and open spaces. Again, what you'll see in the green here are dispersed smaller parks throughout the overall study area. There are improvements to the natural heritage areas related to Campbell Park and Milne Creek. So what this option provides is about 3.7 hectares of new parkland, going from 0 to 3.7. The built form, again, within this option is mostly mid-rise buildings. But what that means is that in the employment lands, we're going up to 4 stories. That's what the height regime is right there. Now, we want to note that in the area that's highlighted directly along the creek, along the Rouge in the south, the southwest quadrant here of the intersection of Highway 7 and McAllen is what we call a special policy area. So it has additional restrictions on what is possible from a built form and intensity because of the risk of flooding on those lands. So in all of those options, this special policy still applies. From a land use perspective, again, mixed use, which allows a range of different uses to happen. But the service employment area is maintained, which you see hatched in blue. Moving on to option 2. And what you'll see highlighted in these red circles are the nodes, the 3 nodes where we are suggesting in this option that there's greater height and intensity of built form. So located with the transit stations so that you're having more people closer to the higher order transit. Now, what we've also done is that we've introduced additional blocks and larger blocks for parkland within this. And then there is an expansion to the creek that exists through the employment area on the eastern side of this plan. And in a similar way, we look at the parks and open spaces. Again, it's a mix of small and medium parks, that there are natural heritage improvements that are happening in different locations. What this plan, this option provides is 6.9 hectares of new park. So almost double of what was in option 1. And in built form, what you'll see in the darker colors happening around those nodes is greater height. Within those 3 areas, with mostly mid-rise outside of it. So tall buildings in those 3 locations. And again, the employment lands restricted to 4 stories in height. Wrong way. In option 3, what you'll see is the addition of these red areas along the corridors between the nodes, again suggesting how this one has greater intensity. The difference within this one is that there's further division of the employment area with new streets to create new blocks for redevelopment. Still employment land uses, but there also is the introduction of larger parks between the mixed use areas that are fronting on the east side of McAllen and the employment areas. With this particular option, many of the same moves as in option 1 and 2, we are getting up to 7.4. So it's exactly double the amount of parkland that was suggested in option 1. From built form, you see that there is more of the darker colors happening along the corridors. So what you see is primarily a mid-rise and tall building type of built form happening along Highway 7 and along McAllen. And for land use, again, primarily mixed use with the employment lands getting reduced. There's also another category we're highlighting here in the red, where that would be an employment mixed use as opposed to a residential mixed use. So there are 5 blocks that are adjacent to the employment lands that you see highlighted. They would take on a different designation. They wouldn't be just employment. It would be employment mixed use. So there could be some commercial uses along with the employment uses. So just to compare the 3 options and the distribution of open space, with option 1 having the least and option 3 having the most. Built form, option 1 having the lowest heights, all mid-rise, along with the employment lands at 4 stories. and the special policy area being restricted to that same height. Option 2, more intensity around the nodes, and then in option 3, along the corridors and the nodes. And then for land use, comparing them all, again, option 1, using the official plan designations of mixed use and employment. Similar in option 2, and then option 3, introducing these new categories. So that is it for the presentation of the options. Christine's going to help to facilitate any questions that you may have, and hopefully we can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brent. So at this time, I'm going to set a timer. Part of my job is to be respectful of time. Time is precious. So I'm going to set a timer. I've been instructed we have 20 minutes for questions, but don't fret. We have a lot of time afterwards to discuss in person. How this is going to work, I'm going to go back and forth between questions in the audience. And we also have questions online from those of the participants from home logged onto Zoom. If you do have a question, simply raise your hand and I'll point you out and you can just walk over. There's a mic in the middle of the room. If you could kindly go over to the mic and ask your question, and questions, if you could limit your questions to about 2 minutes, that would be great. And then we will give them an answer. So I saw your hand up first right here. So I'll kindly ask you to go ahead.
You mentioned an awful lot of low, mid, and high-rise buildings. And I'm wondering, and you also mentioned the fact that you're going to be looking at transportation. And I'm just wondering how you're going to incorporate parking and congestion with the number of high-rises and homes that you're going to be including.
Okay, Brent, would you like to take that question? I'm actually going to give a microphone to the city, but before I do that, I want to make sure if Duran is here, and Liliana, if you're available to respond to some of these questions, that would be great. I think Duran is just outside, so we'll just give him 1 minute and I'll grab the microphone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samson Watts and I work for the city in the transportation department. So thank you for your question. I think it's a legitimate one. When we plan for the secondary plan, I think in the next phase where we will start getting into developing a comprehensive transportation study that looks at how we deal with congestions in the area and also forecast what will the future traffic conditions would look like. That's one aspect. But the other aspect also, we will focus on how we can improve the walkability. How can we improve connectivity in this area such that future residents in Markville can easily walk, cycle, and take transit without solely relying on auto trips. Parking is also a key area that we will be looking into when we go into the next phase. And I can say that without, going into the details is that, right now, Markville area has a lot of parking. And in the future, I think there's a lot of opportunity to revisit the parking requirements and also, making recommendations on how we can use parking to encourage the mode shift and also encourage people to cycle and walk and take transit. And parking, we're not only looking at it from a, auto perspective, we are also looking at it from a bicycle parking perspective. How do we provide bicycle facilities throughout the KDA, the secondary plan area to support that cycling modes? Thank you.
Thank you, Samson. I think I'm going to just stand here so there's no feedback. And I'll ask our staff and member of the project team to just use the podium for responses. So I'm going to stand over here. We have quite a few questions on Zoom. So I'm going to go to Zoom and then we're going to come back to the room. So Phil, if you wanted to read out loud the question from Zoom?
The question is from Jim. He says, traffic planning, the existing traffic conditions at Highway 7 in McCowan are substantial. This project should not proceed without first addressing road/traffic. For example, what is being done to address the level railway crossing on McCowan just north of Bullock?
That's another transportation related question that I'm going to pass to Samson. Thanks, Samson.
Hello? Okay. Hi, it's me again. So again, very good comment. And this is something we have consistently heard throughout consultation with the public, knowing that traffic congestions and delay at Highway 7 and McCowan is a key issue. And this is something that as the project progresses, we will have to work closely with York Region to come up with a mitigation measures to help address those concerns. One improvements that I want to highlight right now that York Region is leading is the McCowan road widening projects. Currently, they're undertaking a detailed design for a road widening on McCowan between 14th Avenue to Highway 7. And this gives us the opportunity to raise the safety concerns and to address those safety concerns through this detailed design exercise. When it comes to the grade separation on McCowan, that is a project that is identified in the provincial, in the York Region Transportation Master Plan. And that is an improvement that we will continue to advocate for to help address some of the traffic concerns that we received and face in this area. Thank you.
Do you think you could address the railway as well? You had a Jim asked specifically about the railway crossing.
So just to follow up on the question from Zoom, if there's any other elements around the railway crossing that we can speak to?
Yeah, I believe the railway crossing you're referring to is on McCowan, and perhaps I didn't make myself clear. I was referring to the grade separation, so that address the vehicles going over or going underneath McCowan in the future.
Thank you, Samson. And just as a reminder, this session and Q&A is being recorded. I know we may have mentioned that to everyone on Zoom, but I also want to make sure that's clear today. So we're going to take another question from the audience. Go ahead, please.
I wonder if you could just put up one of the last slides that shows the road network. Any of those will do, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that okay, that's a good one. No, yeah. So I see you have a crossing of the railway over on the right there. It says sort of pedestrian oriented tunnel type thing. That's where the little black arrow is up and down. If you could maybe, I'm wondering why I think connectivity to the north is very important and the railway acts as a real barrier.
Mhm.
We've talked about McCowan. I see you're putting in something east of McCowan, which looks like a path of some sort, which is good. And I don't know why you're not putting one in on the west side also for better connectivity to the existing neighborhood that's west of the GO station. So is that being considered?
Yes, it is through the park. So
Right, to the
Centennial
park. Yeah, okay. So I would feel better if you put a little arrow there.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you.
for the suggestion.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to take another question from Zoom now, and then we'll go back to the live audience.
Okay, so we have a question from Frank. His question is also a comment. He says the southeast corner of McCowan and Highway 7 under option 3 would put high-rise buildings adjacent to mostly detached homes. This would seem to be totally out of place with the existing residential neighborhood. If option 3 was selected, couldn't that corner keep height to mid-rise at most?
I can take that. Thank you, Frank, for the question. Again, we're not selecting one option or the other. It can be bits and pieces of various options. So your comment is noted about what tall buildings would mean on that particular section. But again, this can be a bit of a puzzle, and we can take height that people have preference for in different schemes and put them together in different parts. So appreciate the comment.
Thank you very much. We'll take our next question from the live audience. Go ahead.
So your presentation was great. I mean, railways and parks are great, but schools are also important. As a grad student, Markville and some other schools are already over capacity, with many students having open blocks at the start of semesters. How does the city expect schools to cope with the introduction of hundreds, if not thousands, of new students? And what actions are going to be taken to ensure an abundant amount of resources for students in the future?
Thank you for that question. Great question. Andrea Celeste will take that one.
I'm happy to address the question to the best of my ability. As I mentioned before, when we had that one slide of all the great team members that we have working on this. One of them is someone who specializes in not just parks and open spaces, but also in community services and facilities. So schools is a really important consideration when you're building a new community. And so what we need to do once we get to a preferred option is understand, okay, so not how many people is this generating or jobs, but how many school age children should we anticipate in the future? And schools go through life cycles. So part of our background analysis that we undertook, and that document at some point very soon, hopefully will be online that you can review, took a look at what is the capacity in the existing schools in a certain catchment area. So it extends beyond the study area to look at, okay, in this geographic area, in terms of elementary schools, are they at capacity? Is there room? And then, so what we need to do is understand what is that delta? So what is that, what do we need to plan for? Do we need a new school? And that's where we reach out to school boards. We have a conversation, and through the policy framework, we potentially even identify sites for new schools, whether they're elementary schools, whether they're secondary schools like this one. And we plan for that, and we put together a policy framework that provides directions to the developers and to the city to plan for those schools accordingly. So we want to make sure that people have a place to recreate, to go to school, and recognize that there might be some capacity issues at certain schools. I don't remember what those are off the top of my head, and my apologies, but your comment is noted. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Andrea will be available afterwards if you want to follow up and have a more detailed conversation about that. That's a great question. We're going to go back, and we've got 3 more questions on Zoom. So we'll get one more. Go ahead, Phil.
So the next question is from Ken. Ken's asking how many new residents under each option? And he's also asking how many school spaces, but I think we covered that. So his question is how many new residents under each option?
Brent, would you like to take that one?
Duran as well.
And Duran, probably.
So there are a range of potential new residents living in this area. So under option 1, it's in the range of 40,000 new people. In option 2, it's 45, and in option 3, it's 50. So what we will say is that does seem like a lot when you look at what's out there today. And option 1 is the policy framework that's currently in the official plan. This is also in line and consistent with the type of intensification that is happening around the region, around GO stations and higher transit oriented corridors. This is all part of regional planning efforts and provincial planning efforts to create spaces along these transit investments to house more people and have more jobs located around this infrastructure. So this is not a unique case by any stretch. And there are places that are far more intense than this that are happening in the region. So I know it's shocking to hear those numbers, but this change is happening everywhere. So it's important for you to be here and hear these things and participate in the conversation to know what is happening more broadly.
And maybe if I can just add to kind of what Brent provided is those are the options that are being tested, but we don't have a preferred land use option. I'll step up.
Yep.
Those are the options that are being tested right now, but we're looking to get your feedback. Once we have the preferred land use concept developed, we'll have more refined numbers in terms of what the split of people and jobs are going to be in terms of those figures. So it will be a combination of population and employment to support the overall community. So it's not one or the other, but there still needs to be some design detailed work to come forward in terms of advancing what the future of this community is going to be, including the amount of people and jobs that will be accommodated in that area. So we are looking for your feedback based on the attributes and the options with respect to that. But those are the ranges that we're currently looking at, but we're also looking to work to refine those details and come forward with preferred concepts so you can have more details about that information.
Thank you. And thank you for that question from Zoom. Another question from the audience?
Yeah, my first comment is responding to what I've heard a lot today, which is this is happening everywhere. So I'm questioning whether the sentence itself is correct, because it's happening everywhere, that we need to make it happen here, right? So 20 years ago, I moved to Markham because it's a suburb area, because it's a place I want to retire, because it's a place with good quality of education, living quality, conservation areas. Now everything's disappearing over the past 20 years. There's so many high-rise concrete buildings. Is this the Markham we want to live in? So my question is, well, I know there are a lot of hard work being putting behind this, and I think as resident, I do appreciate, but this is the first time I heard about this project from a friend, and I'm very, very concerned. My question is there a channel I can vote against this completely?
So just to clarify what I'm hearing, thank you for your question. So the early part of the question was around what is happening? Is this normal? Is this type of growth and change something we're seeing in perhaps maybe the team can elaborate on the regional context, perhaps. Yeah.
To make it happen here. That's my first comment.
Okay, and then so the first question I think is around growth and change in places such as Markville and population growth, employment growth. And I think the second part, if you could.
It's because, maybe I know there are a lot of hard work being putting behind this, but this is the first time I know this. So my question is there a channel I can vote against this completely? Because it changes. It changes my whole purpose. I've been here for 20 years. This is my retirement place. I have certain vision and views about it. I know it's been changing a lot over the Highway 7. There's so many concrete buildings being built up. I know it's beneficial for some people, but for me, and maybe for a lot of people around me, we're not happy to see it happening.
Okay.
So that's my second question.
Thank you for your question. So it sounds like there's two parts to that question. The first one focusing on population growth and change that we're seeing. And then the second part may be around elements of this land use plan that won't change and what elements that maybe the community or that particular person doesn't want to see change and how the city responds to that.
No, and thank you for the question, and your input is appreciated. The first part of the question with respect to growth and change is Markham is a large and fast growing municipality. We are in the midst of a affordable and housing supply crisis. So we are looking for opportunities to accommodate new growth, and specifically with the Markville Secondary Plan area, it is a key development and intensification area as identified in the region's official plan. And what we're looking to do in these areas, specifically along Highway 7, as you heard earlier, I believe was the mayor mentioned, the planned transit investment along that corridor is to really try to maximize opportunities where there will be transit to support land use and higher growth developments. And in terms of how Markham is urbanizing, the form that it is taking is mid-rise and high-rise developments. So one of the things that we're tasked with through this secondary plan is to plan for complete and sustainable communities. It'll be a different form, but we're still looking for those important community amenities that, make Markham who they are, whether it be park space, community facilities, active transportation connections to really leverage that transit investment. So the form is changing, but we're looking to accommodate more people essentially and to provide for those opportunities. But really the important part is to make those communities complete, healthy, sustainable, and viable just within a different form. With respect to the second portion of the question about changing form and what may stay. There are areas of the plan that we're looking to preserve and protect that are staples to community. What we've heard from the community is, the mall is a destination. It's an entertainment hub. So we're looking to make sure that even if the form does change, we want to still see it as a destination, as an attraction for people to attend, to support, as a congregation space. So we can do that through different elements of the plan. One of the other areas that we've heard is the employment area, specifically the service employment area, is a pivotal part of the community in terms of the automotive, the services that are provided to the broader community. So that's another area that we're looking to support. So it really is a balance in terms of providing and creating complete communities. Yes, there will be residential components to support people's lifestyles in terms of accommodations, but we also need to provide retail, entertainment, parks, services. So we're really looking to create a complete community. Oh.
We all know sometimes we usually get a less, get more important, get more points.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that comment. I just want to make sure that I provide a response to the lady so that she can understand our perspective, but we can continue the dialogue. No. Absolutely.
very
Thank
much.
you for the feedback. And we're here to listen to you. So if I've answered the question correctly and there's no follow-up, then
Thanks,
I can get
Duran.
the next.
Yeah, I think what I'm gonna do is also, I'm gonna be around after, because I'd love to talk to you about some of your ideas. So I'll be here after as long as I need to be. That would be great. I want to hear from more people, so please go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to focus on the employment lands. And what I noticed in option 3 is that the road network seems to change in that area. And I'm concerned about the impact that that will have. Specifically, Heritage seems to go straight through to Laidlaw instead of going south. So I'm not sure how that breaks up that whole block. There's also a river in there. And I see that in option 3, the lands around the river widen and the park space widens over in the employment lands. So we're losing the employment lands. And I love that the parks are being more parkland in there and more space around the river. But I'm really concerned about the impact on the employment lands and how what's the justification for that road going straight through instead of maintaining its current direction? Also, if there's a possibility to, if we're going to make such drastic changes, to daylight that river rather than leave it buried. And that maybe is a detailed question for after, and I could stay after for that.
Thank you. Brent, did you want to take that one?
I would love to. Thank you very much for the question. Again, the options are indicating a range of different ideas. Really helpful to hear your perspective on the impact of moving the road and crossing the creek and what it does to the employment land. We'll take that back. That's really useful for us to hear. As far as daylighting of the creek, the intent of widening out the green space on either side of it is in fact to daylight it, to make it a feature of that open space.
There's a chunk that's still buried.
Yes. Yeah, so we would open that air or open it up to the air and make it a natural system again instead of being in a pipe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about the data. So in this, in your presentation, I didn't find any data about the plan. So for example, when we made a plan for our community, I think we should have some standard data about how many hospital, how many school capacity, and how many something like some family doctor. So I'm not expert about it. So could you please share some data about your plan? So let's see if we have enough capacity to contain so many residents here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So the question was around data. For those of you who might not hear on Zoom, the question was around data and what data went into creating this plan, particularly around hospitals and
Yeah, two
transportation.
data. One is the standard data.
What is
When
the
you make
standard?
plan and how they, we have so many buildings here. How many is the current data? Thank you.
Andre, would you like to take that one?
Thank you. Again, I'm not a community services and facilities specialist, but I do appreciate the question, and I think it's an important consideration. So there's certain things we can do through a secondary plan to enable certain uses. So as an example, while the community services and facilities study wouldn't in this case anyway, look at, do we need medical facilities? We do look at schools, we look at rec centers, we could look at daycares. And we can enable that through the policy. So we can provide really specific direction for a certain number of schools of a certain size. There's different approaches to different policy frameworks. Another thing we can do is, refer back to the official plan and the land use context here, which is mixed use, which permits medical uses. So while we can't force someone to build a hospital, we can certainly, enable medical office. We can provide direction for the zoning bylaw for medical uses as an example, which the city might correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe that's already permitted. There's only so much we can do from a market perspective with private land uses, but certainly provide more direction for public uses that we can work with the libraries as an example, if there's a need for a library, and identify potential locations that are, contiguous to an existing rec center as an example. So I appreciate the question, and I'm happy to talk to you after and relay your comments to our community services and facilities experts.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. And if there's any follow-ups, again, we will be around after. It's just a time check. It is 7:30. We do have a few questions here. If we can't get to all of the questions on Zoom, the city has committed to responding to those questions at a later time online. So I want to be respectful of the lineup that we have live in person. So I'm going to take 2 more questions from here, 1 from Zoom, and then we might disperse and answer your questions at the panels.
More or less the same concern about the aging population. I'm kind of concerned about, it seems like we are building a lot of lands for the young and for private use, but there's no, the aging population is not being catered for. And I think in Markham, we have we need more adult daycare program. We need wellness hub. In Burlington, recently, they have a wellness hub idea. So that is to prevent seniors at risk to be hospitalized. So I'm hoping I don't have to move out of Markham, where I've been living for a quarter of a century.
Thank you very much. So the question is around aging in place and being able to stay in Brampton as we age in place, and the facilities and the requirements for an older population and an aging population. Brent?
Stay in Markham, don't go to Brampton. I want to answer your question by using an example of another place that I was doing work in Mississauga around Meadowvale. The Meadowvale Mall in that part of the western part of Mississauga. And that community was master planned back in the late 60s, early 70s and built out. And a few years ago, when we were doing a similar project to this one, what we heard from a lot of the seniors who had bought their houses back in the 70s as their first home, what they really valued about the community was the social fabric of all of their neighbors and the friendships and that part of what Meadowvale meant to them. And I'm sure Markville means that to you too. But what they were finding is that they were getting older. They couldn't take care of their large single family home anymore. And it really destroyed them to think that they had to move out of there for their next stage of life. So what was really interesting to us is that the people who were supporting intensification and redevelopment of the mall lands and the other areas were the seniors, because they wanted the assisted living, they wanted the smaller unit, they wanted the wellness garden, they wanted those things that didn't exist there today so that they could continue through all stages of their life in the same community. That's what they saw the opportunity for redevelopment offered. So what we're talking about here is not something, this is not a blueprint that goes out and gets built tomorrow or even in 10 years. The growth and the change that is possible in Markville will take several decades. So it's not an immediate thing, it's change over time. And that change can lead to improvements. It can offer new schools. That will happen. There will be new community facilities and services. New doctors and medical facilities can come in to serve this growing population. But again, it's over time. So I want to just offer that analogy, because there are a lot of communities like Markville that are going through this same type of change and have the same questions.
Thank you, Brent. We've got 4 more. Of the 4, is there anyone that's open to having side discussion with the team? Raise your hand. No, okay, go ahead, ask your question.
I was shocked when I just heard about the 40,000 new residents, even though with option 1 to add to the community. And also disappointed because there's no plan for like a new schools and new community center and new library. So let's say we can calculate that 40,000 new residents. If 4 residents per family will be 10,000 family. If 1 child in the family goes to school, will be 10,000 childs have to go to the school. And right now with this school, like 1,800 students, how many new schools that we need to accommodate 40,000 new residents? So that's like we suggest the planning to include that into the consideration. And in also that when I moved into Markham 20 years ago, because I like this area will be have low density, have open area and like a friendly environment. But I'm also disappointed we have to move to like high density area, but I think can we keep it as a low density and then if we really need to develop, can we develop in new area with everything like schools, public service, properly planned?
Thank you for your question. So if I could just make sure I get it right. Sounds like there's a concern with the population density in the future. Mentioned the numbers. I know we discussed this already in the numbers, but specifically on density and how that might look like in the future and how long it will take to get there. So if the city perhaps wants to just clarify in the response.
Yeah, so with respect to density, just to kind of clarify what was said previously, it is a long-term plan and it will evolve over time. But I wanted to hone in specifically on the community facilities. So once we do have a preferred land use concept, we do work with other public agencies like the school board to determine what the needs are for both public schools and both at the elementary and high school level. So when we do land at the final population number for the proposed community, we do connect with the school board to determine if additional schools will be needed and then identify the locations of those schools. With respect to community facilities, as one of our consulting team said earlier, is we do have a community facilities plan as well. So we'll be looking at identifying if there is needs for additional community facilities as well to support the overall community. So the way to think about this is we're still planning for a complete and healthy community. It's just the form is changing and we're still doing all the important inputs to make sure that we have all the services that will be available. And those details will evolve as we continue on with this plan. And we're taking your dialogue now as a point in time. We're taking your feedback in, and then we're going to come forward with a preferred plan and address some of those concerns that we've heard today.
Thank you. Next question, please. And we've got 2 left, and then we will close the meeting.
Thank you for your time. A couple of things. One, just a comment. I know we've got a lot of diverse opinions here and I respect them. There's no but here. I'm just going to remind people though, amongst these diverse opinions, we only heard from one young person, right? I don't know about you, but my son can't afford to live here long term. And I hear this all the time with people who work with me at the bank downtown. So we are part of the solution. Having said that, this is a huge change. And my question to you is, can we not have another meeting maybe to talk about the policy and your criteria and some guiding principles? Because this is very different. I don't think it makes sense to come back with your preferred solution. I think we need to talk about what the guardrails are, what the criteria is. I think the question about the data around that in terms of best practices, and if best practices don't exist because we don't build this out, at least what the range could look like. I think that would be good because you are now evangelizing. We are not at that point where I think we can say this is the best of the three. I think we need to talk about what intensity means and how we can make the best plan out of this whole thing before we get to a solution. Does that make sense?
Thank you for the question and the comments. Definitely taking that back. If I could reverberate that, it sounds like a lot there to unpack about the future, for sure. You touched on housing affordability for future generations. You touched on the criteria and the data that goes into this long-term land use plan. So if we could briefly respond, and then awesome to talk about more details as we have the time for the panels. I want to be respectful of time.
So just quickly, appreciate the feedback. We can connect in more detail in terms of the process. So we're just considering options right now, and we'll be engaging over the next couple of weeks, months on these options. And we're looking to bring forth a preferred concept later on, but we want to get all the feedback that we can right now. So now is the time to get that feedback so we can continue the dialogue with you, and I'll connect with you about the points.
In between, because I think we need to talk about like what those parameters are before you come back with a preferred solution. I'm thinking that is an integral step to this. That's what I'm suggesting.
I would,
Take that, man.
thank you. Would love to get your contact information after the meeting. We can definitely follow up for sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna two more questions only, and then I think we're gonna just present the next steps in the interest of time, because we will have future engagement as part of this project. This is the beginning. It's not the end of this Markville Secondary Plan. So two more questions, and then we're gonna move on to next steps.
Okay, so my question is like, I'm not sure this solution sounds not benefit to any of the residents here. Everybody here has concerns kind of against this proposal. Is it possible, like the gentleman said, we can have some vote or something like we can consider how we can proceed? 4,000, 40,000 or 50,000 people, new people coming to the community is a big issue, because currently we already have so many issues with traffic, education, hospital. Now, if we have more, we are getting worse and worse. We're trying to build a better community, not a worse community. So that's my question. So we should give the community a chance to say yes or no to this proposal, not like go ahead with these three options.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So it does sound like I'm gonna ask you for another question before anybody answers that, because it seems like there's a common theme around density and population growth and change. And that's something that I'm hearing across a number of people. I think it's really important to discuss that. I'm gonna ask if we could hear one more question, and then we're gonna wrap it up and respond to your question about the ability to say no to things and the ability to work together. This is a really good question. So if that's okay, I want to hear from the gentleman behind you, and then.
But I think we should think out of the box. Like, we have so many land in the north. Why we don't develop in the north? Like, why we are creating more problems? If this is a bad decision we made before, we should correct it now. We should not build these buildings like make it even worse. If it's the wrong decision, don't make it worse. Correct right now. That's my proposal.
Okay. Next question, and then I'm gonna get the city to respond to it all. Go ahead.
When I tried to get here, and the gentleman Joe asked me to help him, one more question for himself.
Of course.
His question is that in the next decades or couple of decades, where can people go to shopping if Markham Mall become a construction site?
So that's a great question. So I'm gonna unpack that.
Where to go food?
Where to go for food?
Okay.
Food. Where to go for food if this turns into construction? Okay.
People coming there.
Yeah. All right. So unpacking all of the things we've heard. So we've got a question for the city around How can we
Oh, sorry,
engage?
I haven't gotten my question, right?
Oh, you have a question too. Go for it. Yes.
So my name is Shang. I'm here is for really guide my personal, purpose, not for kind of public interest. Because in the last weekend, I drove my kids to this Markville Mall. I couldn't find parking space. Weekend, right? It's not rush hour, just 3 o'clock PM. I couldn't find parking spots. Then just last 1 week ago, last Wednesday, I heard that just in this school, west parking lot is going to install 6 portable classrooms. 6. And even in case of the shortage of the parking space by law, because the requirement by law for this school, 240 parking space. Current parking space is 243 parking space. So now they want to kill another about 20 parking space for 6 portables. Why? And now we are talking about a grand plan to accommodate 40,000 or to 50,000 people. So if we have people moved in, they can market these condos as a good school area, right? They can use as a marketing tool. But when people really move in, where can kids go to for school? Okay, my question is where go for school? Okay.
Very good
That's it.
question. Thank you. And something I keep hearing around the questions that we've heard throughout the evening, population growth, density, where are kids going to go to school in the future? How are they going to afford a home? And understanding kind of where else in the city is growth occurring? Is it just here? And how are we going to accommodate change if maybe some folks don't want some change? So there's also a question in there around parking and transportation parking needs. And I know this study doesn't necessarily look at parking, but I'm going to ask the city's transportation planner to quickly respond to your question about capacity for parking. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to the city to speak about the population growth and density and accommodation long-term. And maybe those things that will be preserved and not changed, just to close the Q&A period. And then I'd love to speak to you at the panels. Samson?
Good evening again, Samson from City of Markham Transportation. Thank you for your question about parking. I think parking is a very sensitive issue and something that we have to look into it in very detail. As part of the secondary plan, this is a long-term vision. And we really have to wrap our heads around how do we want people to travel in this area? And do we really want to plan Markville the way we used to plan with abundance of parking supply, or we want to create a more sustainable community where we can rely on active transportation, people bicycle in the area and take transit. So this is something that we will have to look into in detail in the next phase as to determine what are the appropriate policy for parking that can support the future of Markville. And if you're interested in to learn more about parking, I want to promote one of our other studies that is ongoing with the city. We are developing a citywide parking strategy, which look at developing policies for the entire city. So if you're interested in parking, I can certainly connect with you afterwards and provide more information on that.
Sorry, not only interested in parking. I want to make sure, guarantee to my 2 boys when they attending Markville Secondary School, they are not in the portable. That's my purpose.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. And we're going to speak to that at the panels later. I'm going to turn it over to Duran to have the final word, and then we'll wrap up. And we want to make sure there's a little bit of time left.
Sorry, I think nobody answered my question.
I'm sorry, I missed your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I asked like, if you look at here, nobody seems to agree with this proposal. Is it possible we can stop it? Because I think the mayor is here. And if the mayor can make decision or the councillor or whoever can vote on it, we can we can put it online, ask people to vote whether we support this solution or not, right? Is it possible we can do this? The gentleman had the same question before. Nobody answered that.
I'm going to, to be respectful of time, I'm going to actually speak to that and outside of this forum. And we're going to answer that with the city, and we're going to have time to talk to you about that at the panels in terms of what feedback you have there. So I appreciate your comment there, and we're going to take that and discuss it later on. But in the interest of time, if that's okay, I'd like to just close the meeting for the number of people that are online, and then I'm going to follow up with you as part of the open house, which is planned for after this presentation, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So in terms of closing the meeting, again, this is just a planning study. There's no final solution or final decision being made today. The purpose of this is to just get your feedback. And it sounds like there's a lot of important feedback that we need to discuss. And I think some one-on-ones after this meeting will be really important to make sure we get the full picture. We're going to continue to engage and consult with you and the community. I know members of staff were actually out in the employment areas handing out flyers in person at the mall. So there's no shortage of engagement, and we're going to continue to engage and hear your feedback. There's also going to be all of the feedback we receive here today, but also the discussions that we're going to have. We're going to review those, and these are not final decisions today. There's no voting on these decisions. This is all a collaborative information in, information out. Once we finish these discussions and we engage again, then we're going to have time in the future to present the preferred concept. Again, it's a concept, and an interim report will be presented to council, but we have time to meet with you and to discuss with you today before council receives that. I'm going to turn it over to the city to say thank you and to close the meeting.
So again, thank you very much for participating. We welcome your feedback. We're going to stay back, so we'll be around if you have any questions to follow up. But the intent and purpose of the meeting is to get your feedback, and we welcome your comments, and we are going to take them back and consider them and advance the progress. What we'd like to see from you is please do subscribe to the Your Voice Markham website, so that you can get up-to-date feedback on the status of the project and any upcoming or future meetings. And we'll also look to do some further engagement through that forum. And staff is here, so if you do have any questions that you want to send along or you want to set up a meeting, we're here to connect to help you understand the process and where we're headed with the study. But we do value your impact, and thank you again for coming out and spending your evening with us.